off the break. So there's somebody listening right now who has no understanding or context of the history of the Maroons. To that person, how would you explain that community?
All right. Morning again, gentlemen. Morning, listeners, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Ashe, Ashe, Ashe.
Ashe.
Ashe, oh, Ashe.
We are here as the representatives of the First Nation peoples of Jamaica. And who are those First Nations people? These are people who were called Tainos, Arawaks. We had the Africans who were here prior to slavery or history, as much as they would want us to think otherwise, actually
Hmm.
goes farther than slavery. So the Maroons are the protectors of that legacy. Are you
Wow.
hearing me?
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
sir.
we
Yes,
hear
sir.
you.
We're just
Right.
letting it soak in,
Yeah,
man.
right.
Yeah.
That's
So
Right.
the Maroons are the protectors of that legacy because the importance of who we are as a people is characterized by the fact that the British or any other or no other colonizing entity, including the British, was able to defeat or conquer the Maroons. So the Maroons actually defended Jamaica from colonization.
Hmm.
We were
mm.
considered the leaders of liberation because before Haiti, the Maroons would have fought and defeated the British in 1738 and would have been recognized by the British through the signing of that treaty and acknowledged as free men, free women. Now, it's very important to distinct that the Maroons were not a part of the slavery system, meaning the people they call Maroons are those who they couldn't catch, the ones who fled into the mountains, and then those who escaped from the plantations and joined with those peoples. At the same time, those peoples were carrying out raids on plantations and freeing slaves, who then
Hmm.
joined these communities and made them bigger. So over time, that narrative has changed. Why? Because there's a plan to disenfranchise the people from the land. Because if you're unable to connect your lineage, your blood, your bloodline, and to accept the narrative that we are all slaves, it's
Hmm.
literally taking away the birthright that we all
Mm.
possess. So it's very important for the understanding of who we are as a people. We are the amalgamation of the Tainos, the Africans who were here, and those who were freed during slavery who joined us. And over a period of 80 odd years, we waged war, guerrilla warfare against the British and defeated them to, you know, to have a treaty that we solemnly hold close to us this at this juncture in history, because this treaty speaks to the lands, it speaks to the inherent rights of those people. And what we're seeing now in Jamaica, particularly, is that all these historical you know accomplishments of the people are literally being ignored, or uh, it's been misconstrued as to who we are and
Hmm.
what we stood for. And to me, it's a tactic to blind the people of their true history and their true freedoms and their true rights that exist. So our fight and our struggle today is to preserve what our ancestors would have fought for and held on to for us, the posterity. And as a chief,
Yes.
it's now my duty to pass that on. So the Maroons are symbolic for their resistance, their total opposition to slavery, and not only sitting back, but actually being proactive about alleviating the situation by waging war against the colonizers. Dottie Bookman, who was a Maroon,
Ah,
then left, went to Haiti and helped
yes.
start that revolution. So, the
Yes,
history is
sir.
deep.
Yes,
And so is
sir.
the
The great
connection
Duddy
between
Bookman.
Jamaicans and the Haitians.
Yeah.
That's a very key moment. Duddy Bookman. You bring up Duddy Bookman and of course Cecile Fatima jumping off that revolution, but a lot of people don't know that connection between
Yeah.
Jamaica and Haiti. That's critical
Now,
here.
when you talk about treaty, right, in the current status of the Maroons and the current situations you find yourself in with regards to holding the land, being in what one would consider a poverty-like state, Do you feel like the lands that are being co-opted and being taken away, is that some form of violation of the treaty? And is that
Yes.
something that's acknowledged as a violation of the treaty?
Great question. So the treaty comes by way of letters patent from the king. And if you're in any way familiar with the law, particularly land laws, a letters patent, right? And what it recognizes is the full the full interest, meaning um, owning that property in its fullest, right? And when you go to letters patent, it outlines specifics as to how that land operates, who is then the landlord, and distinguishes that from which it would interfere as per the crown lands. And the letters patent speaks a specific language as to the conveyance or the recognition of this property not being ours, being theirs, right?
Mm,
The the treaty in itself was signed 1738. It sits on the laws of Jamaica. And since the independence of 1962, now the 1962 independence, it's important to understand what that was. That was the British essentially passing control of his estate to a responsible government. So you
mhm,
still had the Maroons operating and maintaining their own jurisdiction, their own property, their
mm,
own politic, separate from what the state of Jamaica has been doing. And in 1962, what ought to have happened was a discussion and dialogue and an understanding that would have been arrived at between the indigenous people and the state government to
mhm,
formalize what that independent Jamaica would look like. That did not happen. So what you had was a treaty that was sitting on the books, but there was no ratification or
mm,
updates of laws to recognize the Maroons and acknowledge them in their existence as free people. Now, people perhaps maybe a little bit confused to what I'm talking about. Let's talk about what happens in the United States with the recognition of tribal
Yes,
nations, right? So
exactly.
okay, yeah.
the treaty of 1776, right, and the concurrent resolution, House Resolution 331. Look that up, right? That brought that treaty into effect, which means all the tribal nations have a state-to-state relationship with the federal government, but they do acknowledge and refer to certain federal laws. They, however, are recognized for their autonomy. They recognize their lands and their own self-determinating rights. These are things that already exist, right? These
Hmm.
are things that could be used as a I'll say a blueprint or a template to arrive at the solution that needs to be put in place in Jamaica. Because here, what you have is the state saying that we're all Jamaicans, right?
Hmm.
Mm,
Now, that's not
Hmm.
wrong, but that's also being disingenuous because then
Hmm.
you're ripping away the rights of those First Nations Jamaicans that are quite
Hmm.
different from those who are under the state government Jamaica. You follow me?
yeah,
So
yeah.
Absolutely.
we've been arguing and batting for this recognition because without recognizing, or let's not say recognizing, without acknowledging this treaty and those land rights, the government is essentially saying all these lands in Jamaica are now going to be moved under a new trust that will be in the control of the Republic government of Jamaica. And they have not spoken to or involved the Maroons in any of the dialogue having to do with
Hmm.
constitutional reform or involvement and recognition. So it's literally a criminal act that's been
Mm,
carried out against the First Nations people of Jamaica who defended this island so we could have freedom today. Because if it
No
wasn't for the
question.
Maroons, there would be no Jamaica. Think about that.
No
If
question.
there were
No
no
question.
Maroons, it would be a full-blown owned British colony, right?
Ah.
And what we're saying today is that Jamaica operates so different from every other Caribbean nation for the sake of the 1738 treaty that the Maroons conquered the British. So the land is still free and it still belongs to the people, but the people don't know that. They're
mm.
confused.
Yeah.
So now,
You know,
yeah, go
no,
ahead.
go ahead, Chief. I'm sorry. No, I just want to ask you very quickly, in pursuant to that, like the indigenous people in the U.S., you all didn't wait around on anybody else to recognize your sovereignty. There's a constitution for the sovereign state of Accompong. I'm looking at the Accompong
Correct.
Citizenship Act of 2022. Could you explain how that works? Because I assume we've got some Maroons here and other places in the world who you still have a formal relationship with?
Correct. So the Constitution, that's been something that's been in the pipeline since about 1999, I believe, was the first
Mm.
attempt to really craft and ratify a constitution. In 2004, they completed the draft, but still wasn't ratified, right? So that's 20 years ago, right? Over 20 years ago that that process started. And what we came in and saw, like, there were so many things that were hanging in terms of our body politic and what that meant today and what does it look like, our preparation and readiness for taking on our governance. What does that look like today, and what are the tools and things that are available to us? We recognize that people have already been waiting. They were ready. They wanted to understand their way forward. They've been looking for the leader who would create this vision for them and show them the path that enabled us to be here today because of the work that our ancestors did. Um, they were the ones feeling it slip away. So we
Mm-hmm.
wanted to ensure that it was protected. So the Constitution was necessary. And what the Constitution is saying, that we, the people, choose to be governed by this entity. And these are the laws of how we, the people, choose to constitute ourselves. Right? That process took over a year. I came into office 2021 and immediately went to work on fixing the constitutional issues we've had. So we went right across the different communities, because it's important to know the Maroons aren't just in Accompong. Cockpit country is a huge territory, and Accompong is only a small part of that, right? So
Wow.
we have Maroons
Yes.
from several communities and districts that participate in the electoral process in selecting their chief. So it's important to know that we have a democratic process in electing the chief. Every 5 years, constituents go to ballot and elect a leader. We have a council of members, which extends from the different districts forming the sovereign state of Accompong, and the governance flows through that mechanism. We have a board of elders who also facilitates, the conversations and the guidance that is necessary for us as leaders. And around that, we have varying pillars of support for our governance systems and our social, infrastructure and what that should look like. So the Constitution was our aim at, galvanizing who we are as a people, the identity, and protecting and preserving the culture and the rights, right, behind all of that.
Do you
Yes, sir.
could you give a rough estimate on the current population of the community?
Okay, so Accompong has over approximately 1,200 residents. The adjoining districts, in total, you're looking at well over 5,000 people. And in the wider cockpit country, well over 75,000 people.
Wow.
75,000.
Wow.
So
Right.
direct descendants, indigenous population. Your current mission is to bring awareness. What's the next phase of your mission? What are you looking to accomplish, both short term and long term for the Maroon community?
All right. So economic sustainability has been one of the serious challenges that we've had, right? Um, we're high up in the mountains. There are no jobs. There's no industry. Most of our people are farmers, tradesmen, craftsmen, or within the tourism sector. But there's a lack of, I would say, capital and resources to inject in creating what's necessary to drive businesses and drive entrepreneurship. So my mission has been, empowering the people and bringing the necessary talents, the resources, and the platform. Creating these proposals that we've been working on around spices. turmeric, ginger, pimento,
Mm.
powdered foods, breadfruit, like powdered breadfruit that's used to make a flour. Persons who are gluten sensitive to gluten meals, then that's a great option for them, right? So agriculture is a huge platform for us, as
Mm.
well as tourism, because we get a lot of tours right throughout the year, to the museum that we have in Accompong, that has some
Mm.
of our artifacts and carries a lot of the history and stories of past. There's several monuments and trails within the immediate surroundings of Accompong and Cockpit Country that makes it an enjoyable tour, a scenic tour, quite like none other. A lot of these lands, you would never have understood the lay of the land, the types of animals, species, the swallowtail butterfly, the yellow belly snake. We have no poisonous snake in the Cockpit Country, by the way, but there are lots of snakes there, right?
Yes, sir.
We have
Yes, sir.
caves, right? We have several caves, many of which our ancestors would hide in during the time of war and create ambush positions against the British.
Mm-hmm.
It tells a story. The different fruits that are in the backlands are not the fruits that are on the
Mm.
main, the mainland. So it's an experience. The streams, the springs, the rivers. There's an abundance of opportunity through tourism, particularly wellness tourism, right? We have such
Mm.
a serene habitat around us that we can play with. The herbs, the medicinal herbs, that's a traditional knowledge that's been passed on to all Maroons through the ancestors. Families will tell you, different stories of the different herbs they used to use for the different ailments.
Mm.
We have preserved these things because, I'll tell you, surprisingly, in the time of COVID, our community was least impacted. I think we had
Mm.
maybe 1 or 2 persons
I
who had
Ah.
wonder why.
COVID.
I
Wow.
And yeah,
wonder
that's a
why.
question that came
Yeah.
across. Chief, why
Yeah.
is it that no one?
Yeah.
Well,
We living off the
Africa
Wow.
is
land.
different.
The medicine
Wow.
is in the ground.
The
Living
air,
off
Mm.
the
the
land.
air, the air in the hills is a
Mm.
little different,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the food is much
Yeah.
different, right?
Much different.
Yeah.
Much
And
different.
the key is that there's going to be a time that I think we're actually in that time now, that people are actually realizing that the plants and the herbs are here for us to heal
Mm-hmm.
us.
Mm.
And
Mm-hmm.
much of the
Mm.
synthetic stuff is the dialed down, watered down version of the original stuff, which is
Yes,
the
sir.
plant,
Yes,
right?
sir.
So I've been focusing on this wellness initiative with Dr. Ben Israel to create the
Mm.
Caribbean Indigenous Medicine Initiative, right, which seeks to preserve the culture through, merging the opportunities behind tourism and the culture and the history of a compound with the move towards holistic wellness,
Yes.
because our space pretty much offers that. So, you know, that is the side of tourism. Then there's a side of skills development. We have lots of talented youths in the community, from the drummers, the dancers, to the craft vendors, people who are making,
Mm.
bracelets and necklaces from beads and seeds in the forest. There's so many people with so many different skills. They make the wicker furniture,
Yeah.
the hats, the straw hats, all these things, but they just don't have resources. And their will has been, when they say that you're defeated, your spirit
Mm-hmm.
has been defeated.
Sure.
I have found that
Yes.
majority of the Maroons, their spirit has been defeated.
Mm.
And why?
Mm.
It wasn't because of the war, but it was the oppression that shifted from a physical oppression to a mental oppression, right?
Mm.
It then started with, government intimidation. You can't identify as a Maroon or you were called a sellout. So people
Uh-huh.
became afraid to claim their identity, right?
Wow.
And the dignity in which we carried for so long pretty much dissipated with the passing of the elders. So my
Mm.
mission has also been reinvigorating life and pride into who we are as a people and what we
Mm.
stood for. We've
Mm.
allowed the narrative to be told by others for too long. And
Mm.
for where my family sits particularly, and who I am as a Maroon, we carry a huge part of that history where no one can shadow that, right? And
Yes,
my
sir.
uncle Melvin, may God rest his soul, um, had been the chief historian for quite some time in the Maroon community. And
Ah.
in his passing, I got a lot of his information, his documents. And, we always used to have long chats and, discussions. And he would open up certain things to me. But, I would say this: I love my people. I'll tell you that we have been deliberately, used in so many ways and manipulated.
Manipulated. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
my Uncle Melville would say certain things, he will say he could only explain it to a certain point because
Yes, sir.
he knew what he was saying. He knew what he wanted to say. He would say it, but then it would stop at a point that you were still wanting more, and he would give you more. That's where I started to do my extra readings, and
Yeah.
it was in understanding that treaty, the language of that treaty, and then going to a festival in Accompong in 2018, I believe, or 2019, and seeing the British High Commissioner, who's the highest representative of the Crown on the island, coming into Accompong to make a call on our celebration, Treaty Day, and to remind us of the sanctity of that treaty, and to remind us that the treaty still stands today as it did when Captain Kodjo signed it.
Yes, sir.
Those were instrumental and
Yeah.
keywords to me at that point, standing in that crowd, because it was at that point I knew there was something wrong and that needed to be fixed. And that was
Yes,
the
it is.
British saying to us, guys, you decide no or leave it alone. And
Yeah.
he came back the following year and made a similar assertion.
Oh,
So
wow.
those
Yeah.
things helped me in focusing my energy on the information. Then I started asking the questions, and the answers wasn't making sense. So I knew there was something wrong.
And
You had to do something.
that's
You had to do
usually
something.
how it goes. Yeah.
Oh,
And
man.
Chief Richard Currie, man, we
Chief
we
Currie.
appreciate
Yeah.
you stopping by and giving us all the science.
And we hope you come back.
Yeah,
I will
absolutely.
come back
Keep
because
us.
here's what.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
haven't spoken about cockpit country and the mining issue,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The
the
situation,
bauxite.
cockpit country supplies
Well,
40% of the island's fresh water.
let's do this real
He
quick.
said 40% of fresh water. Yeah, Latar told us
We're
that.
gonna take a break, and then on the other side of this break, we'll come back with Chief Richard Currie.
Okay.
All right, we're pre-recording, so when I come back in, we're just gonna go right to that. All right, 3, 2, 1. All right, back in Urban View Mornings, Dr. Greg Carl Lamont King on the line with Chief Richard Currie of the Maroons. And before we took that break, you were mentioning.
Yes. 40% of Latar
Yeah.
was talking about 40% of the fresh water, and also the bauxite issue. This question of mining and resource exploitation. Chief, do you mind talking a little bit about that with us?
Yeah, real quick. So cockpit country supplies 40% of the island's fresh water, right? That's massive, right? And many of these water systems are running through aquifers beneath cockpit country, and the limestone and the structure, the geographic makeup of these aquifers makes it very sensitive, in that any disturbance in these areas could significantly affect the flow of water downstream. So what's happened recently is the cockpit country has been targeted for mining. Why? Because recently there would have been data coming in from surveys pointing to significant resources beneath the lands in cockpit country of rare earth minerals, the typical bauxite, but also precious minerals, and metals, gold, copper, and silica. Right? These are all things that are that have been identified in a cockpit country. Much of it sitting close to a compound. Right. So obviously there's a capitalistic focus on what happens with cockpit country. But instead of approaching and engaging with the indigenous people as is required by certain treaties and laws that these state governments are signatories to, these state bodies fall under the United Nations charters, right? So particularly the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. That's something that Jamaica has signed on to, but has not ratified in its laws for over 10 years now, right? So what these things have done is then removed the recognition of our authority over our territory. And in so doing, these lands are now being siphoned off and given to capitalistic entities to go and mine and create whatever developments, or to cut lumber from these lands, much to the disgruntlement of the Maroons, who have been chastised, ridiculed, and in other cases, attacked
Mm.
because of the actions of state entities and other affiliated entities. So it's a challenging period for us, fighting and pushing the government to do the right thing in preparing and recognizing these rights, putting them into law, and making it clear, because cockpit country is very, very, very precious. And if those underwater aquifers are damaged, right, there's no telling
Yeah,
what
what
happens
could
after
happen?
that, right?
Yeah.
Um, a lot of those minerals are also supplying, um, war machines, right? So
Uh-huh.
there's a geopolitical situation that we face, because there's China, there's the United States, and there's Russia. That's all looking at our soil, and all of them are
Mm.
playing in the backyard of the United States. So those
Hmm.
create strenuous situations on state government to do the right thing. But then it's a conundrum because they're taking money from all these entities. So
Yeah.
how do you then fulfill your mandate and pay respects to policies, as it relates to security, for the region, for the people, and for the rights of the indigenous peoples?
Yes, sir. Not
Yeah.
just the people, but the species. Understand y'all have over half the
Everything.
species in Jamaica are there with you, and mass dislocation of every living thing. And of course, we know
Correct.
central to Maroon philosophy is the idea that all living things deserve respect. So this is
Thank you.
it's a fight for everything that breathes and lives, brother. And this is very powerful.
And think about it, right? We supply 40% of Jamaica's fresh water. We have no running water in our community. You know,
Ah,
I started hitting out
what?
at those things like, why do you
Yeah.
come here every year to celebrate with us? And you still can't give us water if you say we're part of your system and your structure. Then we
What?
recognize that the government really can't spend taxpayers' money in the Maroon territories because these are non-tax paying territories. So there's a conundrum.
Oh no,
So
well that's a legal basis for sovereignty then. If you're not paying
that's
taxes,
my
there's a reason
point,
for that, right?
brother.
Yeah.
That's my
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
So
Yes,
they
sir.
will
Yes,
go
sir.
and they will throw, they use different mediums to get certain information into the space to create distortion. So people are not understanding what's really going on. The only
Hmm.
time the government really spends money within Maroon territories if it's money coming in through the United Nations for some forestry protection or from historical preservation of something. These are monies that they're permitted to use within these territories, and most of it end up going elsewhere
Of
anyway.
course, of course, of
So
course.
we're ready for governing our own affairs, and that's what we want to get out to the wider international community. We have a state government that's not willing to acknowledge its international obligations and international treaties and laws, which is a very dangerous thing, by the way, right?
Hmm.
Because treaties are sacred, right? And you break one, it sends ripples through,
Correct.
the
Yeah.
entire communities as relates to relationship between countries and acknowledgement of treaties. Are we witnessing a total breakdown of the whole structure that stability was preempted upon coming out of the wars? That's what the treaties did. They brought calm and peace to otherwise tumultuous warlike situations. So we, the Maroons, have a lot of questions to ask. But yes,
Yeah.
we're sure of our status and who we are, right? We're
Yes,
trying
sir.
to avoid things getting into a much, more strenuous and intense. And we want to protect the integrity of what we're doing by always doing the right thing and maintaining full transparency in doing the things that we've done. So you'll see me delivering letters to the Minister of Constitutional Affairs to have the treaty issue rectified before the constitutional review or reform is over. And that was perhaps my fourth letter to them, and they still have not acknowledged or responded. So we've gone above that. We've gone to the United Nations third committee. We went there in 2022. We've had the UN Special Country Rapporteur on Indigenous Rights come here last year, February, just to see for himself and, do his own reconnaissance. And, all of that brought a lot of good, positive attention that people could see now that, these guys aren't just talking rubbish. These guys aren't just, pulling. These guys have standing.
And hopefully your visit with us today can bring even more attention to the elements of your mission that you want to be heard with regards to, monetizing your tourism, economic self-sustainability, government protection, and just
the sovereignty, the Constitution,
preserving the sovereignty,
everything from the drinking water to the life there and the minerals, the precious
protecting
minerals.
culture and history, and getting your young people back reinvigorated.
And this is a global. This is a global audience you're speaking to, Chief. I mean, it's not just through the app. We're worldwide. So, no, we appreciate you.
No, we appreciate you.
And appreciate your representatives and representatives of Maroons who are here in the DMV, who participated in the drum circles. Buju Banton. It's all started. And we appreciate everyone who has made this possible. Sister Natalie, Dr. Amin, Sister Latara, who came in and did this with us. And all the young people who you've reached through those drum circles at Bruce Monroe Elementary and Howard University here in DC. This won't be the last time we talk, but this was a watershed moment, Chief.
I appreciate that, man. Listen, January 6th is our annual event. It would be great if you guys could come down, do probably a live feed from there.
Man, come on.
Wait a minute.
Yes, sir.
Wait a minute.
January
the new
6th.
January 6th. You know what I mean?
That's the Accompong Festival.
Correct. January 6th every year. So this will be our 287th anniversary.
Treaty Day.
Yes, sir. Say less.
It's a massive day. It's a massive day, and it's a day full exposure to the culture, and it's very informative. And I welcome you guys. I'm inviting you actually to come down for January 6th. I'm sure you won't be disappointed.
That's a good day to spend. We've had a couple of rough January 6th up here in the U.S. But we need to come and spend with some free Africans. Some free Africans on free
sovereign
soil.
Oh man,
you can't worry about no taking over the Capitol like here in the U.S. So sir.
We'll talk about it. All right, thanks again.
Appreciate you, Chief.
Stay with us, Urban View Mornings, right here on Urban View, channel 126.
All clear. Thank you. Thank you.
No, thank you, man.
Chief, thank you, man.
Thank you.
Respect
Anytime,
you, and thank
we
you.
can jump back on whenever you guys are ready. We're hoping to launch the platform for Maroon Fest 2024, which is the festival we just spoke of. Right?
Yes. No, you got to come announce it here, man, well in advance so we can push that.
Awesome. Yeah, man.
Hi, morning.
Good morning, Natalie. How are you?
Over here. I'm good. We were listening in. Thank you so much, Dr. Carr, for facilitating this interview.
No, brother, the ancestors did that because Dr. Amin had mentioned this before, and I hit the ground running. And of course, the Mont saw y'all first. So
last night.
The ancestors won't let this happen.
Man. We've been trying to set up a call, a meet up, so it just serendipitous how Brahma showed me this morning and said, you guys are on the radio and talking about it. I was like, okay, let me let it happen right now.
Thanks for telling me. Anytime again, like I said,
we'll do that.
Come back, guys.
We'll stay in touch and we'll definitely link up at Howard later. The crew is ready. We're going over to the park now.